standardized learning.
Good morning.
My name is Dalia Mabrouk from Al Ain University. And I have one comment to share with you. I think one of the elements that lead to success in any organization is sustainability and success. You said that we should be in contact with outer environment. But before thinking about outside the community or outside society, I think we should start from inside the community or the organization itself. Because I think one of the most important mistakes that most of the Arab organizations commit is having a wide gap between the senior management and the employees themselves. So we should make sure that every employee have the mission and the vision of our organization before talking about going outside.
Okay, I'm going to just make a brief comment on this because I think maybe the way I expressed myself before was not clear. When I use the term environment in referring to that phrase from the Shell study, sensitivity to the environment, they weren't just talking about the global ecological situation.
Society.
They were talking about whatever our organization is, are we sensitive to the communities in which we operate?
Yeah.
The lives of the people who work for us, you know, they live in a community. Are we sensitive to that community? So they meant the environment in the most broad sense, not just the global ecological situation. So I think it's very much in line with what you're saying. It starts with, you know, are we aware of the lives of the people who work in the organization, their children, their families, their schools? So are we paying, is that even meaningful to us?
Yes, but maintaining sustainability, I think it's a collaborative work. It should involve every single employee inside the organization. So how come we work in a team and most of them don't know the mission and the vision of the organization? Right. There is a wide gap between the senior management and the employees. We should find a way in order to bridge this gap.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And I think that is the core of the kind of internal work as I was talking about.
Yeah. How
you really build an environment that really people are working in teams effectively and there's real communication at all levels, across the levels. So that's fine, I understand the question entirely now. That's a great question. As we're doing this now, let me just make one comment on the process. I'm not going to respond to all these questions in the next 5 minutes, okay? There will be no way I could do it. I'm going to pick one or two, which I think would be useful to move us along. We wanted to start to get some of these questions out so that we as a community are aware of the questions that we have. Okay? Now, in a sense, what we're trying to do today is practice being a learning community. Learning community does not depend upon an expert who comes in and gives them the answers, but people are continually clarifying the questions they have. When we finish the last portion of today, it's going to be an extended cafe. Now, you don't know exactly what that means probably for most of you, but you'll be in a lot of conversations in small groups. And we're going to ask you to remember these questions. And whatever are the ones that are most meaningful for you, so that those conversations are really anchored in the questions that are most important to you. The first principle of a cafe process is the first principle of all real conversations. Questions that have heart and meaning to us. So I'm going to respond to a couple of the questions just as a way of moving us into the next phase. But I just want you to know, so I'm sure some of you go, wow, he's got that question and that question and that question. He's going to answer all these questions. No, I'm not. We are going to spend time thinking together about those questions. All right? So it's really useful to be aware of what the key questions are. Let me make one related comment. This may make perfectly good sense. It may seem a little odd. The questions that matter, the questions that really matter, do not have simple answers. The questions that really matter, we live into. They orient us. So when someone says, gee, how do we start to build a learning culture in my organization context, like construction industry? That's a question for you. That's a question that you live with. you keep working on. Now, I may have a point of view or some experience to share that can be helpful, but I don't have the answer. You see this difference I'm trying to make? It's not like good questions don't have the answer. Good questions orient us. They express what matters to us, and they orient us in our own ongoing learning. If you have answers, there's nothing to learn, right? Questions are the key to learning. Real questions. Questions that have heart and meaning to you. Now, that said, let me respond, if I could, to a couple of comments. Now, are you waiting there to say something? Because I don't mean to cut you off. The bench standing. I can't see you because of the lights. Are you just holding the mic, or is there somebody else waiting to speak? Oh, you are. Okay. Why don't you say what you want, and then I want to make a couple of comments, and we're going to move on.
Good afternoon. My name is Ali, and I'm a graduate from Abu Dhabi University. Mm-hmm. My question is refers to adopting and implementing change. My question is there any factors or what determines to what extent that companies should adopt change? And the second question is whether there are any limitations where afterwards the change brings other than expected results.
Unexpected results.
Is there any limitations where afterwards the change becomes or generates other than expected results?
Yes, yeah. I see. I think there's one more hand over here. Is that right? Please.
My name is Dr. Hassan Mustafa from Emirates College of Technology. I think we should control our progress. I think we should measure our improvement and performance with methods like the balanced scorecard. And I would like to add one point. It's very important to compound the organizational learning with monetary incentives to encourage and motivate the employees inside the organization.
So can I just ask just a question to make sure I understand what you're saying there at the end? So you're saying that a lot of companies do not give thought to the monetary incentives that they need? I think he needs the mic again, just so we can clarify this last comment he made.
Should compound the organizational learning with incentive, with monetary or economic incentives to encourage and motivate the employees inside the organization to participate in the organizational learning.
I did understand that. What I was asking was kind of so I could appreciate why you asked that. Are you saying that you think many companies don't pay attention to the monetary incentives as they should?
No, they did, but we should put it in the focus.
We should put it in the focus?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. I think right next to you, and then.
I'm Dr. Elias from Emirates College of Technology. I want to share with you the question related to the change in the organization. Shall the change in the organization come from the top management or from the lower? I think, in my opinion, that the change in the organization comes from the top management and must share the employees and their ideas and their methods and everything. And the employees itself must know about the mission and the objectives of the organization.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of comments. You want to say one last thing? Go ahead.
We are doing the World Cafe now.
We already are doing the World Cafe. I was absolutely right.
It's just a question. This is Wafa Nuruddin from Emirates College of Technology. You mentioned two main features that characterize the long life organizations, and one of them is the culture. And one of the elements of the culture was innovation. Is there a well-defined framework to nurture innovation within the culture, the organization's in educational context?
Yes.
That's my question.
Yeah. Is there a well-developed framework? So it's a little bit like the question earlier about frameworks. So let me make a few general comments, we have a series of speakers who are going to come here in just a minute, and going to start with a case that's very much grounded in the reality here in the Emirates. So I'm just going to make a few simple comments to pick up on a few of the threads. This business, I'll start with what you said at the end about frameworks. Frameworks are really important, and the way I think about frameworks is you need a lot of tools, but you need to make sense of those tools. Otherwise, they can be very fragmented.
Internationally known, well-known, successful framework.
Pardon me?
I mean, international framework which is successful.
International framework. Okay, so I may or may not be responding to what you're looking for right now. I'm not sure. But I heard this in several different comments about, you know, how do we kind of see the framework? It relates very much to top-down, bottom-up, and any broad question about, well, how do we start to build a culture of learning? In our work, there's three fundamental areas we come back to again and again and again. And I can show a picture with this a little bit later, but I'm just going to make the comment now. So, because I think it makes perfectly decent sense by itself. We often have a picture of a three-legged stool. And the first has to do with aspiration. What is it that we're trying to create? Why do we exist? What's our sense of purpose? What is it that we're really trying to accomplish? How do we think the world will be a different or better place as a result of our work? This all has to do with what we often call building a capacity for aspiration. And it's important at all levels of an organization. The way it gets expressed by people at the executive level, the way it gets expressed by people at the front line might be a little different in line with their own respective work. But it's equally relevant at all levels. Where there is no vision, there is no energy. Where there's nothing that people really care about, they just do their jobs. Whenever someone says, well, how do I start to do this in my organization? Because people just come to work. They just come to work. They have no larger goal. And I always say, well, why is that? Oftentimes, managers say, well, it's just the way the people are. I don't believe that. That's the way they're acting. I'm not disagreeing. They may be acting as if they have no larger goal, because no one's ever asked them. You take that same individual who's working in a way that doesn't seem to have much of a goal other than to just do their job and stay out of trouble, and you follow them in their life, and you find out in their families they have all kinds of aspirations. And they work in their communities, and they do a lot of things in their larger life, but the way they're treated in their work, they have no larger goal. Human beings have a sense of purpose, I guarantee you. As human beings, we have things we really care about in our lives. The problem is often the way we manage, none of that comes out. No one ever asks. And I always remember a story years ago. It was a man who was I learned a lot from. He was a family-run business. He was the second or third generation president. And he told this story. His company made furniture. Okay, and he told a story about a man who was a lathe operator. Now, a lathe is a circular machine that you use for shaping various items in furniture. So this man had worked in the business for 30 years, his whole career, as a lathe operator. He died relatively early. He was in his mid-50s when he passed away. And Max went to his funeral. At his funeral, the man's family read his poetry. So this lathe operator, this man just doing this very mundane work, in the evenings was writing poetry. And Max said he sat and listened during the funeral service to them reading his poetry. And he realized that this man had worked in my company for 30 years. No one knew he was a poet. And then Max said, was he a lathe operator that was a poet, or was he a poet that was a lathe operator? It was a real moment for Max in his own leadership. And he realized the way they managed, the way they treated people, the whole of the person could never come out because they were never creating the space for that to come out. So I also think this always relates to the, this kind of disconnection. I appreciate the image you were using between the disconnection of people at the front line at the executive level. People's work is different. If you're the CEO, if you're the chief financial officer, the head of operations, you have different work than people who work at the front line. It's just different. If we're out playing in a football, a soccer game, people have different roles. Some people are running down the field trying to score a goal. Other people are defending. Someone else is a goalkeeper. In any system, there are different roles. The fundamental problem here starts with, are there different values? This was expressed beautifully by another mentor of mine who's a CEO, a founder of a technology company, very influential technology leader in Massachusetts. He said, I'm not opposed to hierarchy. These are his words. I'm not opposed to hierarchy. I think hierarchy can be very functional. You often need hierarchy in organizations. He said, I am opposed to the value system that holds the person lower in the hierarchy as somehow being fundamentally less important than somebody higher in the hierarchy. People's jobs are different. People are different. That does not mean that they're in some sense fundamentally less valuable. Now I know that might sound idealistic, but it's a principle. In my experience, the gifted leaders, the gifted executives really understand this principle. People are different, their jobs are different, their education is different, their capabilities are different. That's simply the truth. But in an organization of the sort that I think many of us are seeking to encourage, the value associated with work is always the value. People's work is valued. The space for them or the opportunity for them to show up as human beings is present. I'll give you a specific way of thinking about this. In this domain of aspiration, obviously one of the key tools we work with is vision. What's our vision? How many people in your organization have a vision? It's kind of a trick question. How many people have a vision? How many people are allowed to express their vision? Two different questions. The only way I've ever seen an organization get good at building shared vision is it continually works to create the space for everybody to reflect on everybody's vision. So my vision as a frontline worker might be a bit different than the vision of a chief executive, but they're both important. And to create the energy and spirit for continual innovation, you need to nurture these visions at all levels. That doesn't mean they're the same. It doesn't mean that they're equal. It just means they're important. You build shared vision by nurturing an environment where everybody is continually asking, what do I care about? What's the nature of my work? How does it fit within a larger system of work? Now that comment also touches on another aspect of the framework, which is how do we see the system? Dr. Deming, who was a mentor to me for many years, many of you have heard of W. Edwards Deming, a famous pioneer of the quality management revolution, used to put up a picture. And this was, of course, in the days when the rise of Japan was seen as one of the kind of signs of the real changes in the world. So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when Deming was really influential in the early days of Japan's development after World War II. And he used to put up this simple picture, and it was a picture of a value chain. And he said, look, in this picture, everybody can see how their work fits. And he would then contrast with a picture of a hierarchy. Who reports to who? He said the normal picture in organizations is a hierarchy, so everybody knows who they report to. But they don't see how their work matters. You have to have a picture so people see the system whereby everybody's job matters to the net of what's accomplished in the organization. And he used to say that's the picture that transformed Japan. People started to think in terms of value chains and who contributed in what particular ways to the value the enterprise created. So seeing our role in the larger system is really vital. And then we can start to say, well, every role matters. If a role doesn't matter, why does it exist? Right? But we don't work to create a management system usually that makes it clear how people's different jobs fit together. I'm just going to make one more comment, then I want to introduce some of our speakers. We'll come back to the higher education one this afternoon, which I think is important. But the one that I didn't want to miss on at all, the comment you heard early on, we tried something, we tried to implement some suggestions, and then we did that, and then we found a lot of differences that people had when we started to implement that. My reaction to that is, so what's the problem? Why are you surprised? And I may be wrong, but I was kind of listening and hearing in that a kind of a one-step approach to learning. We see a problem and we do something to fix it. No, you see a problem, we do something, and then we have new problems. It never ends. This is not like a one-step response. We got employee suggestions, we implement the suggestions, or we implement some. And then you find out something new. So it's very important to appreciate that learning is not for a short period of time. There's not one episode of diagnosing, seeing a problem, and then implementing it. It's forever. When do you stop learning how to be a parent? When your kids are 18 years old? If you think so, just wait. You'll find out you have a whole new set of problems when they're 18 years old. When they're 30 years old, no, you have a whole new set of problems when they're young adults. It never ends. Learning is forever. It never ends. It's not about implementing a set of suggestions. Once you've done that, guess what? You'll find out some new problems. That's why it's the spirit of ongoing learning that matters. And of course we have a good metaphor for this, and we're going to hear about some of it in just a minute, which is continuous improvement. The thing I always liked about that phrase, continuous improvement, was the word continuous. It never ends. So you start to realize it's really a shift in mindset, that this goes on forever. To do that well requires a lot of humility. Sometimes I find executives think, well, we want to build a learning organization. Okay, great. We want to build a learning organization. But they often think that, well, we're just going to implement some programs. We get the right trainings. By the way, one of the reasons I told you the story about how the term organizational learning developed in this study that Shell had done is that I'm trying to stress this isn't just about a bunch of training programs. We implement the training programs. Deming became very frustrated in the last few years of his life because the quality movement, the quality management movement, had become a worldwide phenomenon, and yet he felt it was being trivialized. He stopped using the term quality management, quality improvement. And what he talked about in the last 5-7 years of his life, all of his speeches, all of his programs, everything he did, was about, in his words, the transformation of the prevailing system of management. The transformation of the prevailing system of management. This is ultimately about us as managers. If we think our job is to have the answers and get people to implement what we think is needed, then we have one mindset. If we think this is about all of us managing, all of us continually learning, we have another mindset, and it's always about me. So there's 3 legs of the stool: fostering aspiration, seeing the system, and continuous reflection. How we continually reflect, all of us, at all levels, To be an effective manager in a learning organization, you have to really be prepared to continually learn yourself. That's when the culture starts to change. When managers can say, oh, I see, I didn't understand. I see, we made these mistakes. I see, it's about me learning. That's when you start to change the culture. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just start to introduce some of the speakers, and I'm going to turn it over. You're going to do the introductions, right? Or
We'll do the appreciation now, and then we'll do the discussion.
oh yes, you're going to do the appreciation. Yeah. Okay. Good. And then we'll start doing the introductions of the different speakers. Okay?
We can do on the wall.
Oh, sure, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
We would like to take this opportunity to express our sincerest appreciation to our distinguished guests for their attendance and cooperation. Special thanks to our speakers for providing excellent and highly engaging speeches, as well as the conference's valuable sponsors for their participation and cooperation. Dr. Ala Jarad and Dr. Ali Khouri, can you please join us on stage? I would like to invite all speakers on stage to receive a token of appreciation that represents Abu Dhabi. I kindly ask the speakers to remain on stage. Dr. Peter Senge. Dr. Ziad Al-Kahlout.
Thank you very much. Please. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Please. Yes, sir.
Professor Jeff Gold.
Thank you. So we'll do the appreciation before the speaker.
Dr. Robin Mann.